My son-in-law sent me a text that read, "We are completely done with you. Never contact us again." My daughter followed up shortly after to confirm it. I just smiled, calmly replied, "No problem," and went ahead to cancel the $2,400 monthly automatic payments I had been making for their house and cars. A few weeks later, when the collection calls started rolling in and bills began piling up, they showed up at my doorstep, begging me to turn it all back on. My name is Daniel Fisher. I am 64 years old, a retired financial advisor living in Scottsdale, Arizona. I spent 38 years helping people manage their money, plan for retirement, and make smart investments. I never imagined I would have to use those exact same skills on my own family. But life has a funny way of shifting things. 6 years. That is exactly how long I funded my daughter, Rachel's lifestyle. Rachel and her husband, Sean. My beautiful baby girl, who used to run to the door screaming, "Daddy's home," whenever I came back from work, now refused to look me in the eye. Sean Miller, my son-in-law, is 37 and works as a middle manager at a tech company in Phoenix. When Rachel first brought him home 7 years ago, I thought he seemed decent enough. He was ambitious, polite, and had a firm handshake, traits my generation highly values. For the first 6 months, he called me sir. That should have been my first warning sign. No one is that polite unless they are looking for something. The change was slow, like watching rust spread across chrome. You do not notice it happening at first, until one day you realize the shine is completely gone. In the beginning, when I stepped in to help with the down payment on their house, Sean was full of gratitude. "Mr. Fisher, I don't even know how to thank you. We will pay you back, I promise." That was $28,000 for their place on Canyon View Lane. By the way, I am still waiting for that reimbursement. Then came the car loans for both vehicles. Rachel's Honda Accord and Sean's Ford F-150. "Dad, just help us out until we get on our feet," Rachel had said, holding my hand tightly across the dinner table. Her eyes were so full of hope. How could I say no? So, another $680 was added to my monthly auto drafts. Along with the insurance premiums, the Costco membership, and the health insurance coverage I provided for them through my retirement benefits. It all felt like what a good father was supposed to do. You take care of your kids, right? And even when they are adults, and even when your gut tells you that you are being taken advantage of. I remember the exact moment Sean's mask slipped for the first time. It was about 2 years ago at a barbecue at their place. One of Sean's coworkers joked about how Rachel had married down because their house was so much nicer than his apartment. Sean laughed loudly and said, "Yeah, well, good things happen when you work hard and make smart decisions." He did not say a word about who actually paid the down payment. There was not a shred of gratitude or acknowledgement. Rachel was standing right there. She heard him, but she chose to say nothing. That was the moment I started keeping track. Not out of malice, at least that is what I told myself. It was professional habit. I am a financial advisor and I track numbers. So, I built a spreadsheet. Every single payment, every dollar, every little favor that morphed into a monthly obligation. The total grew like a tumor. Their mortgage was $1,450. The 2 car payments were $680, and the insurance was $270. A grand total of $2. $400 was automatically deducted from my retirement account every single month. Over 6 years, I had funneled $172,800 into their lives. And that did not even include the down payment, the furniture I bought when they moved, or the emergency cash I handed Rachel whenever Sean's truck needed repairs, or when they wanted to remodel the kitchen, or when they decided they absolutely needed a brand new 75-inch television. Speaking of that television, it was the final straw. It was the moment everything became crystal clear, like someone wiping the fog off a mirror. It was a Saturday evening in early March. Rachel had invited me over for dinner, which was a rare occurrence these days. I should have known something was off when Sean greeted me at the door with a stiff, forced smile. "Hey, Daniel, come on in." Not Dad, and certainly no longer Mr. Fisher. Just Daniel, as if I were a mere acquaintance he was barely tolerating. The house smelled wonderful. Rachel had made my favorite pot roast. The table was beautifully set. For a brief second, I let myself believe it was real, that my daughter genuinely wanted to spend time with me, and that we could be a family again. Then I walked into their living room and saw it. The television was massive, hanging on the wall like a black monolith. It was at least 75 inches, maybe 80, the kind of screen you only see in sports bars. Sean stood in front of it, remote in hand, grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. "Take a look at this, Daniel. Just got it mounted yesterday. 8K resolution, quantum dot display, 120 Hz refresh rate. Top of the line, cost $3,200, but it is worth every single penny. The picture quality is insane." Rachel stood in the kitchen doorway watching me, holding a wooden spoon. The expression on her face made my chest tighten. Was it guilt? Embarrassment? Or was she just waiting for me to say something that might ruin their dinner? I kept my voice casual, even friendly. "Wow, that is quite an investment. You two must have saved up for a while for this." Sean's smile stiffened slightly. "Well, you know, a bonus came through at work. Figured we deserved to treat ourselves." I nodded slowly, doing the math in my head, the same math I had been doing for 6 years. "That's great. Really good. Hey, just curious. Did you guys ever manage to clear those credit cards? Last time we talked, Rachel mentioned you had about $11,000 in high-interest debt." The temperature in the room instantly dropped about 20 degrees. Rachel's face went pale. She opened her mouth, closed it, and looked at Sean like a drowning person looking for a life preserver. Sean clenched his jaw. He set the remote down very carefully, very deliberately. When he turned back to face me, the polite facade was completely gone. Underneath it was something cold and hard. "You know what, Daniel? This is exactly the problem. Right here. Every single time we try to enjoy something, every time we make a decision about our own lives, you have to insert yourself. You have to bring it back to money, to debt, to what you think we should be doing." I held up my hands. "Sean, I didn't mean it like that." "Yes, you did. You absolutely did. You just can't help yourself. You think because you help us out from time to time, it gives you the right to control every aspect of our lives, to judge our choices, and to make us feel like children who can't handle their own finances. That's not fair," I said quietly. "I never tried to control you." "Really?" Sean's voice was rising now. "Really? Because from where I'm sitting, every conversation, every family dinner, every phone call comes with strings attached. Little passive-aggressive comments. Have you considered this? Did you think about that? Maybe you should be more responsible." Rachel started crying silently, the tears rolling down her cheeks as she just stood there frozen. I looked at my daughter. "Rachel, is this how you feel too?" She couldn't meet my eyes. She just stared at the floor and whispered, "Dad, you do tend to, sometimes it feels like you don't trust us to make our own choices." Something cracked inside my chest. Not a full shatter, just a hairline fracture that I knew would spread. I stood up, leaving the pot roast completely untouched on my plate. "I should go. I'm sorry for upsetting you both. I really didn't mean to." Sean didn't apologize. He didn't take back his words. He just stood there with his arms crossed, watching me grab my coat. Rachel followed me to the door, still crying, but she didn't try to stop me. "Dad, I'm sorry. We just need some—" "I know," I said. "You need space. I get it." I drove home in total silence, no radio, just the sound of my own breathing and the blur of streetlights past the window. When I got back to my house on Desert Bloom Drive, I went straight to the garage to work on my 1967 Ford Mustang, a restoration project had been tinkering with for 3 years. I sat in the driver's seat, gripped the steering wheel, and let myself process what had just happened. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Rachel. "Dad, I'm sorry about tonight. Sean is just under a lot of stress at work. Let's talk in a few days, okay?" I didn't reply. I just sat in the darkening garage, surrounded by the smell of tools, car parts, and motor oil, waiting to see what would come next. I didn't have to wait long. 2 days passed. 48 hours of absolute silence from Rachel and Sean. I spent that time in the garage, mostly with a torque wrench in hand, reassembling the Mustang's carburetor. There is a meditative quality to mechanical work. Every piece has a purpose. Every bolt has a home. Nothing is arbitrary, which is a sharp contrast to family dynamics. On Tuesday afternoon at 3:47 p.m., the phone buzzed on the workbench. I wiped my hands on a shop rag and picked it up. The message was from Sean. "We are completely done with you. Stop trying to run our lives. Never contact us again. We mean it." I read it 3 times, staring at the letters as if they were a foreign language I needed to decode. Then Rachel's message came in through. Shorter, slightly softer, but just as final. "Dad, I think this is for the best. We need space to build our own lives without constant judgment. I can understand. Take care of yourself." I set the phone down. I picked up the carburetor jet I had been cleaning, set it down again, and looked back at the screen. The words hadn't changed. My daughter had just cut me out of her life over a comment about a television and credit card debt. For most fathers, this would have been a crushing moment. Tears, maybe anger, followed by frantic phone calls begging for reconciliation. But I am not most fathers. I spent 38 years as a financial advisor. I have seen financial manipulation, dependency, and entitlement in all its forms. I have watched clients ruin their own retirements to bail out ungrateful adult children. I have seen families tear themselves apart over money. I just never expected to experience it firsthand. I sat on my stool and did what I should have done years ago. I opened my mobile banking app and really looked at the numbers. Not just my spreadsheet, but the actual flow of capital leaving my retirement fund. $2,400 every month, regular as clockwork. I had set up the auto drafts 6 years ago and simply stopped questioning them. Chase Mortgage for 892 Canyon View Lane, $1,450. Honda Financial for Rachel's car, $340. Ford Credit for Sean's F-150, $340. State Farm Insurance, $270. Then there were the non-automated expenses. With the Costco membership I had added them to, $120 a year. The family health plan, through my retirement benefits, which cost me roughly $400 a month that I hadn't even counted, and all the random emergency transfers. $500 here, $800 there, to $200 for the kitchen backsplash. Rachel just had to have. I pulled up my spreadsheet and started adding it up, really adding it up. Every transfer, every check I had written, every single time Rachel called with a crisis, and I opened my wallet. The number that popped up made me blink. $172,800 over 6 years, plus the $28,000 down payment I gave them as a wedding gift. Round it out, and it was over $200,000. $200,000 invested in my daughter's life, in her independence, and in the man who had just told me to never contact them again. I started to laugh. I couldn't help it. It wasn't a bitter laugh. It was the kind of laugh you let out when you finally understand the punchline of a joke that has been building up for years. They wanted independence. They wanted to build their lives without my judgment or control. Perfect. I could give them exactly that. My finger hovered over the phone. A part of me, the father part, that still remembered 6-year-old Rachel with pigtails and scraped knees, wanted to call her, apologize, and ask what I could do differently. But the other part of me, the guy who spent 4 decades watching how people manipulate and take advantage of others, knew exactly what was going on. Sean had convinced Rachel that my financial support came with invisible shackles, that accepting help meant surrendering their autonomy. Instead of having an honest conversation about boundaries, they decided to simply blow up the relationship. Fine. I typed out a reply to Sean. No problem. Wish you the best. To Rachel, I wrote, I understand. I wish you both well. Then I opened my banking app. Chase Mortgage Autopay, cancel. Honda Financial Autopay, cancel. Ford Credit Autopay, cancel. State Farm Autopay, cancel. Each cancellation took about 30 seconds. Tap, tap, confirm. Years of financial backing wiped out with a few clicks on a glass screen. I leaned back in my chair and looked at what I had done. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel a rush of satisfaction either. Just a strange, deep sense of peace, like I had finally dropped a heavy pack I hadn't even realized I was carrying. They wanted independence. Well, they were about to get a masterclass in it. I thought about calling my attorney, Gerald Torres, but decided against it for now. It wasn't time yet. This wasn't a legal battle. It was much simpler than that. I was just a father respecting his daughter's wishes. They wanted me out of their lives, so I stepped out of their finances. It was only fair. I went back to work on the Mustang, installing the rebuilt carburetor, tightening the bolts, and connecting the fuel lines. The engine roared to life on the 3rd try, settling into that beautiful, vintage rumble. I let it idle for a few minutes, listening to the steady rhythm, feeling the vibration through the concrete floor. My phone remained completely silent. No panicked calls. No texts saying, "Wait, that's not what we meant." Nothing. Good. I pulled up my calendar. It was March 18th. Their next mortgage payment was due on April 1st. The car payments were due the same day. The insurance renewal was April 5th. They had exactly 2 weeks before things would start to get tight. If they didn't check their automated payment confirmations, it might take even longer. Sean was the type of guy who wouldn't notice a problem until it's slapped him in the face. I had time. Time to make sure all my legal bases were covered. Time to document everything. Time to prepare for whatever came next, because something was definitely coming. I knew that as surely as I knew the Mustang's engine would start every time I turned the key. Sean and Rachel were living way beyond their means. Combined, their take-home pay was probably around $6,800 a month. Without my support, they were looking at least a $2,000 deficit every single month. They would figure it out eventually, and when they did, it was going to be an interesting reality check. I shut off the garage lights, walked inside, and poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon. I sat in the leather chair by the window, watching the desert sunset turn the sky shades of orange and purple. My phone buzzed one more time. Rachel again. "Dad, I know this is hard, but it's the right thing to do. We need to stand on our own 2 feet. I smiled and took a sip of the bourbon. "You're going to get exactly what you asked for, sweetheart," I whispered to the empty room. "Let's see how steady those feet really are." The next morning, I called Gerald Torres. Not because we were friends, we weren't, but his firm had handled estate planning for a few of my former clients, and they spoke highly of him. I needed an expert in family law and financial matters, someone who could tell me exactly where the legal lines were drawn. And his office was in downtown Phoenix, in a sleek glass building on Monroe Street. The receptionist led me to a conference room with a sweeping view of the city stretching out toward the mountains. 5 minutes later, Torres walked in. He was in his early 50s, with silver hair and a sharp, well-tailored suit. He shook my hand with a grip that told me he spent time at the gym. "Mr. Fisher, your message said this was about family financial support." I laid it all out for him. Everything. The 6 years of payments. The $172,800 total. The texts cutting off contact. And the automated transfers I had just canceled. I showed him my spreadsheet, my bank statements, and all my documentation. Torres listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and pressed his fingertips together. "Let me make sure I have this straight. You have been making these payments voluntarily on behalf of your adult daughter and her husband. There was no written agreement, no promissory note, no contract of any kind." "Nah," I said. "And they are both employed adults with no disabilities or conditions that would legally obligate you to support them. Rachel is 34, Sean is 37. Both work full-time and are perfectly healthy." Torres nodded slowly. "Then legally, Mr. Fisher, you have absolutely no obligation to continue these payments. These were gifts, voluntary contributions. You can stop them at any time, for any reason, or for no reason at all." A weight lifted from my chest. "You're certain?" "Absolutely. Arizona is a community property state, which affects how married couples divide assets, but it doesn't mandate a legal duty for parents to support adult children. In fact, the text messages explicitly stating they want no further contact actually strengthen your position. They cut the tie. You are simply honoring their request." I couldn't help but smile. "So, if they come back later and try to demand that I resume payments, they have no legal standing? None whatsoever." Torres pulled out a notepad. "However, if you want my professional advice, I suggest you document everything moving forward. Keep those text messages. Screenshot them. Print them out. Save them in multiple places. Keep a log of every payment you made, and exactly when it stopped. If this turns into a dispute, and in my experience, money disputes usually do, you want an airtight paper trail." "Already done," I said. "I'm a financial advisor. Documentation is second nature to me." "Good." Torres leaned forward. "Mr. Fisher, if you don't mind my asking, what is your plan here? This feels less like a simple consultation and more like preparation for a specific outcome. I met his gaze. I'm just letting my daughter and son-in-law learn a valuable lesson about independence. Nothing more. No harassment, no threats, no illegal activity. Just removing the financial safety net and letting the chips fall where they may. Torres allowed himself a small, knowing smile. Well, from a legal standpoint, that is entirely within your rights. Just remember, if they do come back, and if they ask for help, any future agreements you make must be in writing. Clear terms, clear expectations. Understood. I left his office feeling lighter than I had in days. Everything I was doing was completely legal and entirely justified. They had pushed me away. I was simply respecting their boundaries. That afternoon, I tied up the remaining loose ends. I called the insurance provider and removed Rachel and Sean from my family health plan. The customer service representative was polite and processed it without issue. When I explained my daughter was transitioning to her own employer's coverage, saving $400 a month. Next, I logged into the Costco website and canceled their household cards. It felt almost petty, but it was another $120 a year. And if they wanted bulk paper towels and cheap gas, they could pay for it themselves. I went line by line through my bank statements, looking for any other recurring payments or subscriptions I might have forgotten. I found one, a $15 monthly streaming service Sean had asked me to add to my account temporarily 3 years ago. Cancelled. By evening, every single financial tie had been severed, built on top of the mortgage, car loans, and insurance I had already stopped. Those were the big ones. Those were the ones that would really leave a mark. I stood in my kitchen, looking at my phone, half expecting it to ring. Surely the banks had sent notifications about the stopped auto payments by now. Surely they had seen the emails. Nothing. Either they weren't checking their accounts, or they saw them and assumed it was a system glitch they could deal with later. Sean always struck me as the type to ignore a problem until it couldn't be ignored anymore, especially if admitting to it meant acknowledging just how dependent they were on me. I walked out to the garage. The Mustang restoration was coming along beautifully. I had replaced most of the engine components, rebuilt the transmission, and restored the interior. What was left was mostly cosmetic. Body panels, paint, chrome trim. But mechanically, it was sound, strong, and entirely independent. Unlike certain people in my life. The first week passed quietly. Too quietly. I kept expecting the phone to ring, kept waiting for an angry text from Sean or a tearful voicemail from Rachel. But there was nothing. Total radio silence. It was almost unsettling, like watching a demolition countdown and waiting for the blast. I filled the time with research. I wanted to know exactly what would happen when the payments stopped. I looked into Arizona's foreclosure timelines, studied vehicle repossession laws, and read through credit reporting regulations. The picture that emerged was stark. Without my support, their financial framework was incredibly fragile, and it was only a matter of time before they realized it. I closed the garage door, walked back inside, and poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon. Sitting in the leather chair by the window, I watched the desert sunset paint the sky in deep shades of orange and purple. My phone buzzed once more. It was Rachel again. "Dad, I know this is hard, but it's the right thing to do. We need to stand on our own." I smiled and took a sip of the bourbon. "You're about to get exactly what you asked for." "Sweetheart," I whispered to the quiet room. "Let's see how well you can stand." Ishas. The standard late fee for a missed mortgage payment is about $75, accompanied by a few automated calls from the lender. At first, it is no big deal. People miss payments occasionally. But by the second missed payment, the late fees compound, the calls grow increasingly serious, and a formal notice of default arrives in the mail. By the third missed payment, things get incredibly real. The lender files a notice of a trustee's sale. In Arizona, foreclosure can move rapidly, sometimes taking as little as 90 days from that very first missed payment to the actual auction. Vehicle loans follow a similar track, but move even faster. Miss 2 payments, and the lender threatens repossession. Miss a third, and the tow truck shows up in the middle of the night. I looked at the calendar. It was the 23rd. Their mortgage was due on the 1st of the month, just 9 days away. Miss they. If they had enough cash in their checking account to make the payment manually, they might scramble through 1 month. But it would completely drain their reserves. Then they would face the next month, and the month after that. Eventually, the math always catches up. I poured myself another glass of bourbon and sat in my leather chair, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky was putting on a classic Arizona show, with deep shades of orange, pink, and purples, blending together so vibrantly it almost looked artificial. My phone sat perfectly silent on the side table. I picked it up and began scrolling through old photos. There was Rachel as a baby, her first day of school and high school graduation, smiling brightly with her whole life ahead of her. Finally, I saw her wedding photo from 7 years ago. She looked so happy, so incredibly in love. I was the one who walked her down the aisle, placed her hand in Sean's, and welcomed him into our family. Now, here I was, systematically dismantling length of a financial foundation I had built for them. Was I doing the right thing? Or was I just an embittered old man punishing his daughter for choosing her husband over her father? I stared at that wedding photo for a long time. Then I remembered the look on Sean's face at that barbecue, taking all the credit for their success while completely erasing my contributions. I remembered the expression in his eyes during that final dinner. Not anger, but sheer contempt, as if I were merely an obstacle to be managed, rather than the person who had provided everything they had. I remembered Rachel's text messages stating they needed to stand on their own 2 feet. Fine, let them stand. I removed the album from my favorites and put the phone down. Tomorrow, I would return to the garage, back to my Mustang, and focus on building something designed to last. The 1st of the month arrived. I knew the date perfectly, because I had circled it in red ink on my calendar, like the arrival of a major storm. That morning, I worked diligently on the Mustang's body panels, sanding away small spots of rust and smoothing out minor imperfections. The methodical work kept my hands busy and my mind focused, but I still checked my phone about once an hour. Still nothing. Either they had cobbled together enough cash to make the payment manually, or they were about to discover a very unpleasant surprise. 3 days later, I got my answer. I was having coffee at a small local diner near my house. The old school kind with vinyl booths and servers who call everyone sweetheart. When I saw her, Rachel was right across the parking lot. At the grocery store, pushing a cart toward her Honda. Even from a distance, I could see the tension in her shoulders and the rigid, stressed manner of her movements. I watched her load the bags into her trunk. I noticed she was buying generic, store-brand items, the budget cereal, and the plain pasta you only select when you are counting every single penny. She didn't see me. She just got into her car and drove away while I sat there, watching my coffee grow cold, reflecting on what I had just witnessed. Rachel used to shop strictly at high-end organic markets, always selecting premium brands. Her presence at a discount grocery store, buying generic items, confirmed the pressure was mounting. The realization should have made me feel something. Perhaps guilt or a sense of satisfaction. Instead, I just felt a quiet curiosity, like a scientist observing the natural progression of an experiment. I paid for my coffee, drove home, and spent the afternoon researching the next phases of property law. If they were going to return to ask for help, I needed to be fully prepared. I began reviewing property transfers, specifically looking into quitclaim deeds. It is a straightforward legal document that transfers ownership interest from one party to another with zero warranties or strings attached. If I chose to assist them later, I could make transferring the deed of the house into my name a strict requirement. It was completely legal, fully binding, and a profound lesson in the true cost of independence. But I wasn't there yet. That was thinking too far ahead. Who specialized, specifically named Morrison's, Usikastis Castle specifically in real estate, to set up a consultation for the following week just to explore my options and keep my bases covered. The weekend passed without a single word from Rachel or Sean. On Sunday afternoon, I drove past their house, telling myself it was just a slight detour on my way to the hardware store. Both of their vehicles were parked in the driveway. The lawn was noticeably overgrown, and the trash cans were still sitting out at the curb 2 days after collection day. They were small details, but clear indicators that the stress was disrupting their normal routine. On Monday morning, I received an automated promotional email from Chase. Because I had originally established the billing profiles for their mortgage under my main account, I was still on the property's notification list. The subject line read, "Reminder, your payment is past due." They had missed it. They couldn't pull the funds together, and the mortgage on 892 Canyon View Lanes was officially in default. I deleted the email and finished my coffee. Later that afternoon, my neighbor Trevor stopped by. Trevor is a retired police officer who stepped away from the force around the same time I retired. We aren't incredibly close, but we occasionally share a drink on the back patio to chat about sports, retirement, and local news. "Hey, Daniel, got a second?" Trevor asked, scratching the back of his neck, looking slightly uncomfortable. "Listen, this might be none of my business, but I ran into your daughter at the bank yesterday. She looked really rough, man. Like she'd just been crying. When she saw me, she almost turned and ran the other way. I watched her loading her trunk. Look, I'm not trying to pry, but it's a tiny branch and things carry. You doing okay?" "I'm fine, Trevor. Thanks for checking in," I replied. He studied me for a moment. Even in retirement, the investigator instincts never completely disappear. "All right, just wanted to make sure. You know where to find me if you need anything." After he left, I stood in the driveway for a long time, thinking. Rachel had gone to the bank to try and address the past due balance. That meant she had discovered the automatic payments were canceled, and she knew I had done it deliberately, yet she still hadn't called. It was pride. She and Sean had burned the bridge, told me to never contact them again, and now they couldn't bring themselves to admit they needed financial backing. They were likely scrambling behind the scenes, trying to figure out how to cover the massive shortfall without reaching out to me. Fine. Let them scramble. I went inside and made dinner. Roasted chicken, vegetables, and a glass of wine, severing the quiet evening. My phone remained completely dark on the counter. That night, I opened a notepad and drafted a clear framework of principles for the moment they inevitably returned. First, any future assistance would be formally documented with explicit contracts and clear terms. No more informal arrangements. Second, their choices had to carry natural consequences, not out of malice, but to highlight accountability. Third, the dynamic had to change. I was done being the accommodating parent who opened his wallet at every complaint. If they required my help, they would have to request it, with genuine honesty. Looking at those notes, I felt a distinct shift within myself. For 6 years, I had been passive, reacting to their emergencies and funding their lifestyle without a second thought. That version of me was gone. The person remaining understood that support shouldn't mean being taken advantage of, and that sometimes helping someone means letting them navigate their own fall. I folded the notepad and placed it in my desk drawer, right next to the folder containing all my financial records. Everything was organized and ready. They had fractured the relationship and demanded independence. When they returned, I would offer a clear choice: learn from the experience and rebuild on honest terms, or face the financial realities alone. Either way, I would be fine. My lifestyle, my retirement, and my project car didn't depend on them. But they depended on me, even if they hadn't fully realized it yet. Smiling slightly, I poured another drink and waited for the inevitable. Another month moved along slowly. May gave way to June, and the intense Arizona heat settled over Scottsdale. I kept my focus on the Mustang. The bodywork was practically finished. I had stripped the old paint, smoothed every imperfection, and welded the rear quarter panels where rust had started to take hold. It sat completely in primer, waiting for the final finish. I had selected the color weeks ago. Acapulco blue, the exact factory shade from 1967. It was classic and genuine. One afternoon, while wet sanding the hood, my phone rang with an unknown number. Some instinct prompted me to answer it. "Mr. Fisher, this is Linda Wright from Chase Bank. I'm calling regarding the property at 892 Canyon View Lane," the voice said. I set down my sanding block. "Yes? Our records show you are the primary contact for the automated clearinghouse payments on this mortgage. Those payments stopped approximately 2 months ago. The account is currently 3 months past due, totaling $8,750 plus late fees and penalties. We have made multiple attempts to contact the primary homeowners, but I am not the property owner," I explained calmly. "The owners are Rachel and Sean Miller. They are my daughter and son-in-law. I was assisting with the payments previously as a gift, but that arrangement has concluded." There was a long pause, followed by the faint sound of typing. "I see. The issue, Mr. Fisher, is that the automated profile was established through your account, so you are still listed as—" "I canceled those transfers," I interrupted. "If Rachel and Sean wish to maintain the mortgage, they need to establish their own billing methods. I am no longer involved." After some additional typing, the representative spoke with a cautious tone. "Mr. Fisher, I should inform you that a notice of trustees sale has been filed. The property is scheduled for a foreclosure auction on July 15th, unless the past due balance is cleared in full. If you have any influence with the homeowners—" "I do not. Good luck with your collection efforts," I said, and hung up. July 15th. That gave them exactly 5 weeks. The clock was ticking significantly faster now. That evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Dad, please. I need to talk to you. It's really important. I stared at the message for a full minute before replying. I am respecting your decision regarding your independence. Best of luck. Immediately, the typing bubbles appeared, vanished, and reappeared before the final message landed. Dad, I know you're angry, but we are in real trouble. The bank is threatening to take the house. We can't pay this without you. We didn't realize. Please just call me. Please. I looked at the screen, waited, and then turned the phone completely off. I spent the next 2 hours applying a smooth, even layer of primer to the Mustang's doors, focusing entirely on the precision of the work. The next day, I drove past their house again and noticed a significant change. One of their vehicles was completely missing, Rachel's Honda. Only Sean's F-150 sat in the driveway, looking unwashed and neglected. I didn't stop, simply noting the detail before continuing on. By the weekend, Trevor stopped by while I was mowing the lawn. Hey, Daniel, you hear about your daughter's car? I turned off the mower. No. What happened? Repossessed Thursday night, Trevor said, his face lined with concern. Tow truck came down the street around 11 p.m., made a ton of noise. Sean ran out in his pajamas, yelling at the driver, and Rachel was just sitting on the porch crying. Man, I know you guys are having a rough patch, but that's incredibly tough. They made their choices, Trevor, I replied. I'm just respecting them. He looked at me for a long moment. All right, if you ever need an ear, you know where I am. After he left, I stood in the driveway holding the hose, watering some desert landscaping that didn't particularly need it. One car was gone. The financial pressure was tightening significantly. I went inside, grabbed my notepad, and added a strict condition to my framework. Quitclaim deed. Non-negotiable. Property title transfers to me, and they can remain as tenants. It was a firm boundary, but independence meant facing reality. That night, my phone buzzed with a message from Sean. Daniel, we need to talk. Man to man. This has gone too far. I almost laughed out loud. Man to man. After telling me they were completely done, and to never contact them, he wanted to negotiate. I replied, You told me to never contact you again. I am simply honoring your request. His response was immediate. That was a mistake. I was angry. We were both angry. But we can fix this. We just need a little help to catch up on the missed payments. Just a temporary lift. It was always temporary with Sean. I texted back. I wish you both the best, but I am not in a position to assist you at this time. It was an absolute fiction, of course. I had ample resources. My retirement fund was substantial. My investments were highly secure, and my pension comfortably covered my expenses. I could easily resolve the shortfall. But I wasn't going to step in until the lesson was fully realized. Sean's next text was much longer. Fine, whatever. But you should know, Rachel is crying every single night. She's barely eating. She thinks this is all her fault. Your own daughter is breaking down and you don't even care. What kind of father does that? I read the text 3 times, letting the emotional appeal wash over me before responding with absolute clarity. What kind of daughter tells her father she is completely done with him? What kind of son-in-law sends texts telling someone to never contact them again? You both chose this path. I am giving you exactly what you requested, a life completely independent of me. Congratulations. I blocked Sean's number, and after a brief hesitation, I blocked Rachel's as well. They needed to understand that words carry real weight. You cannot burn a bridge and expect to walk back across it the moment things become inconvenient. Afterward, the house was remarkably quiet. 3 weeks later, on a Wednesday afternoon, I was finishing the final color coat on the Mustang when I heard a vehicle approaching outside. It wasn't in my driveway, but out on the street. I walked to the edge of the garage to look. A flatbed tow truck was parked directly in front of my property, and loaded securely onto the back was Sean's F-150. Sean was standing right there on the sidewalk in his work clothes, looking completely disheveled. His face was bright red as he shouted at the driver, "You can't do this. I have rights. I'm only behind on 2 payments." The driver, a stocky man in work overalls, didn't even look up as he secured the tie-down straps on the flatbed. "It's 3 payments past due, buddy," the driver said flatly. "And we sent 4 separate notices. You're lucky we didn't come out sooner. I need that truck for work." "How am I supposed to get to my job?" Sean yelled. "Not my problem, man. Take it up with Ford Credit," the driver replied, climbing into the cab. I watched Sean's face cycle through anger, panic, and a sudden look of complete defeat. His shoulders slumped, his arms hanging limply at his sides. Then he turned his head and spotted me standing in the garage. Our eyes met across 30 yards of concrete, but it felt like an immense distance. Sean's expression shifted from defeat into something much sharper. His face contorted, and he began walking rapidly and aggressively toward my driveway. "This is your fault," he shouted. "You did this. You're ruining our lives just because your pride took a hit." I didn't move, simply holding my shop rag and waiting quietly. Sean stopped right at the very edge of my driveway, remaining just outside my property line. He was visibly shaking, his hands trembling, and sweat was beaded on his forehead. Despite the cool evening air, "All you had to do was keep helping us," he said, his voice straining. "Just keep doing what you were already doing." But no, you had to prove a point. You had to punish us just for wanting our own lives. "I gave you your own life," I replied calmly. "This is what it looks like. This isn't independence. This is sabotage. You canceled everything. The mortgage, the cars, the insurance, all of it. You left us with nothing," Sean yelled. "I left you with exactly what you brought into the relationship: your jobs, your income, and your ability to stand on your own feet. Just like Rachel said you wanted." I paused. "How does it feel?" Sean's face turned an even deeper shade of red. "You self-righteous old." "Careful," I interrupted. "You're right on my property line. And Trevor, over there." I nodded toward my neighbor's porch, where Trevor had just stepped outside, "is a retired police officer who would be happy to document any issues." Sean glanced over at Trevor, then looked back at me, grinding his teeth in frustration. "We're losing the house," he finally said, his voice dropping to a flat whisper. "The auction is in 3 weeks. We maxed out every credit card trying to catch up. We borrowed from friends, sold everything we could unlock. We have nothing left, Daniel. Nothing. You win. All right? You win. Is that what you need to hear?" Behind him, the tow truck pulled away, carrying his F-150 down the street into the sunset. Sean didn't even turn around to watch it go. "I didn't want to win, Sean," I said. "I wanted you to understand a very basic rule of life. When you tell someone you are completely done with them, you don't get to run back the moment it's convenient. You don't get to demand they save you from the consequences of your own choices. We didn't cause this. You did." "No, Sean. I built a safety net. You cut it down." Now you're surprised that you're falling. I crossed my arms. Where is Rachel? Something broke in his expression. Home. Crying again. She wanted to come here and ask for help, but I told her I'd handle it, that I could fix this. He let out a bitter, broken laugh. I can't even do that. For a split second, I felt a passing shadow of sympathy. He looked completely lost and entirely powerless. A man who had spent 6 years coasting on someone else's stability, without ever considering what would happen if it disappeared. Then I remembered his text message. We are completely done with you. The sympathy vanished entirely. Tell Rachel I hope she finds the independence she wanted so badly. Now you both have it, I said. I turned around and walked back into the depth of the garage. Behind me, I heard a frustrated shout, but he didn't follow me onto the property. After a minute, the sound of his footsteps faded down the sidewalk. 5 minutes later, Trevor appeared at the garage entrance. That was incredibly tough, Daniel. It was necessary. Trevor, I replied, picking up a clean paintbrush. They needed to learn. Learn what? How to lose everything. I looked at him. Learn that actions have consequences. Learn that independence means more than just avoiding accountability for your spending. Learn that you can't treat someone like an ATM and act surprised when the account is closed. Trevor shook his head. Your daughter is the one paying the price for this. My daughter made a choice. She chose her husband's pride over her father's support. I am simply respecting that choice. I dipped the brush into the Acapulco blue paint, applying a smooth, even stroke to the Mustang's rear quarter panel. She knows where I live, Trevor. If she needs help, she knows exactly how to ask for it. What if she's too proud to ask? Then she's more like me than I thought, I said, continuing the long, steady strokes. And eventually, pride isn't enough to keep the utilities running. Trevor walked away, shaking his head. I continued painting until the light completely faded from the sky, then cleaned my brushes, locked up the garage, and went inside. I poured a glass of bourbon, sat in my leather chair, and unblocked Rachel's number, just in case. The phone remained quiet for 2 hours. Then, at exactly 9:47 p.m., it rang. Rachel's name lit up the screen. I let it ring twice, then 3 times. On the 4th ring, I answered, Hello, Rachel. There was silence, followed by a soft, broken sob that caught me slightly off guard, despite everything. Dad, she whispered, her voice cracking. Please, we need help. I am so sorry. We were so incredibly foolish. Please. I closed my eyes. Are you ready to listen to my terms? Yes. Anything. Please don't let us lose the house. I'll agree to whatever you want. I'll consider it, I said. I'll call you tomorrow morning. I hung up before she could reply, set the phone on the table, and took a deep sip of bourbon. Tomorrow I would lay out my conditions. The quitclaim deed, complete financial oversight, and a formal apology from Sean. Tomorrow, the real restructuring would begin. Tonight, I would let them reflect on just how close they had come to losing everything. The Mustang sat in the garage, gleaming in its fresh coat of blue paint, nearly restored and fully sound, just like my plan. The next morning, I called Rachel at exactly 10 a.m., making sure to give it the full 12 hours I had intended. She answered on the very first ring, her voice sounding incredibly strained, as if she hadn't slept a wink. Come over to the house today, I told her. You and Sean, 2:00 p.m. We will discuss terms. Thank you, Dad. Thank you so much. We'll be there, she said quickly. I hung up. I didn't need the expressions of gratitude just yet. They hadn't earned them. I spent the next few hours preparing, not cleaning the house. It was already pristine, and the coffee was brewed. But mentally organizing exactly what I was going to say and how I would say it. This meeting would set the tone for every interaction moving forward. I also made a quick call to Gerald Torres. "Mr. Fisher, I wondered when I'd hear from you again," Torres said. "I need you at my house at 2:30 p.m. today, Gerald. And I need you to bring a quitclaim deed for the property at 892 Canyon View Lane." There was a distinct pause on the line. "Your daughter's house." "My daughter's current residence," I corrected, assuming she agrees to my restructuring terms. "Understood. I will be there on time." At 1:55 p.m., a vehicle pulled into my driveway. It wasn't their Honda, and it certainly wasn't Sean's truck. It was an older, worn-down Toyota Corolla, likely borrowed from a friend or a budget rental they could barely afford. I watched from the window as they stepped out. Rachel looked like she had aged 5 years in a matter of weeks. She had heavy dark circles under her eyes, her hair was pulled back into a messy ponytail, and her clothes hung loosely on her frame. She had lost a noticeable amount of weight. Sean looked even worse. He was completely unshaven, his shirt was deeply wrinkled, and he carried the profound exhaustion that comes from sleepless nights and constant mental stress. Good. I opened the door before they could even knock. "Come in." They followed me into the living room like individuals walking toward a sentencing hearing. Rachel's eyes were already welling with tears, and Sean refused to make direct eye contact. I pointed to the sofa. "Sit down." They took their seats while I remained standing. In any serious negotiation, the dynamic matters, and this was strictly a business arrangement. "So," I began, "you need assistance." Rachel nodded as a tear ran down her cheek. "Dad, we are so incredibly sorry. We were entirely wrong. Sean shouldn't have sent that message, and I shouldn't have supported it. We just didn't fully realize." "What you didn't realize was that I was funding your entire existence," I said, keeping my tone perfectly measured and cold. "Because frankly, I find it hard to believe you were that oblivious. Rachel, you are not a foolish person. You knew the funds were coming from somewhere." Sean finally spoke, his voice raspy and dry. "We thought we were contributing a fair share. We thought the automated amounts were just covering a portion of it. We didn't realize you were handling every single line item, every single bill." I let out a genuine laugh. "You honestly believed your combined incomes could comfortably cover that mortgage, your lifestyle, and the payments on 2 vehicles while you maxed out credit cards. Come on, Sean. You knew exactly what was happening. You just chose to ignore it because admitting it meant acknowledging your complete dependence on me." His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He couldn't. "The auction is in 2 weeks, Rachel whispered, her voice trembling. "The bank said if we don't bring the full 8,750 plus all the dollars, the house, all the accrued penalties, they are going to sell the house. We've tried everything. We asked everyone we know, maxed out every line of credit we had left. We have absolutely nowhere else to turn. Except to me. Except to you." She looked up, her eyes wide with clear desperation. "Please, Dad. I know we don't deserve it. I know we treated you terribly, but please. We will do whatever it takes. We will pay you back. We will change everything." I held up a hand to cut her off. "Let's establish reality right now. You cannot pay me back. You don't have the financial capacity to do so. Even if you committed every spare dollar of your current income toward this debt, it would take decades to clear what you owe me and that's assuming zero interest. How much face drained of color. I picked up a structured folder from the side table, opened it, and pulled out the printed, documented spreadsheets. This is the line-by-line history of your expenses over the last 6 years. The total financial backing provided amounts to exactly $200,800. That includes the down payment, the monthly mortgage, both vehicle loans, insurance premiums, healthcare coverage, the Costco, access, streaming profiles, and every single emergency cash transfer. It completely excludes the furniture I purchased for your move, your wedding gifts, or the countless meals I funded. I placed the spreadsheet firmly on the coffee table between us. They both stared down at the final number as if it were a binding judgment. Now, I continued, the Yiver, Yuli. Let's look at your current liabilities. You have $8,750 in past due mortgage payments. Your credit card balances total $18,600. And according to what Sean mentioned to Trevor, you owe another $3,000 in personal loans from friends. On top of that, both of your vehicles have been repossessed, so you have zero transportation. Your immediate financial deficit is right around $31,200. Rachel was completely sobbing now, unable to hold it back, while Sean looked like he was about to be physically sick. I can clear this for you, I said, keeping my voice level. But you need to understand something. Stepping in means spending capital I never intended to touch. This is money from my retirement fund. Money meant for my own hobbies, my own security, and my own life. So if I am going to do this, it happens entirely on my terms, non-negotiable terms. Do we understand each other? They both nodded, too overwhelmed to offer any real resistance. Good. I glanced at my watch. My attorney will be here in 20 minutes to formalize everything. Before he arrives, let me explain exactly how this is going to work. I sat back in my leather chair, facing them across the coffee table. This was the moment of complete accountability, the moment where the dynamic of our relationship shifted permanently. There are 3 strict conditions, I stated. You accept all of them, or you get absolutely nothing from me. Is that clear? Clear, Sean muttered, his voice barely audible, while Rachel simply nodded through her tears. Condition number 1, I will clear your immediate debts in full. The mortgage arrears, the credit cards, and the personal loans, the entire $31,200. I will also provide you with a used vehicle. It won't be luxury, but it will be reliable transportation. In exchange, you will execute a quitclaim deed, transferring total and absolute legal ownership of 892 Canyon View Lane to me. The property becomes mine. You will remain in the house as tenants, paying me $800 a month in rent. That is roughly half of what your mortgage used to be, which is incredibly generous. But the house belongs to me. If you ever choose to move, you are free to do so, but the real estate remains permanently in my name. Sean's hands were visibly shaking, and Rachel looked as if she had been struck by the sheer weight of reality. Condition number 2, I continued. Every single month, you will provide me with a complete, itemized financial report. Every expense, every utility bill, every single dollar that leaves your hands. I want to see the receipts, and I want to see the bank statements. Absolute financial transparency. You wanted to prove you could stand on your own 2 feet. Outstanding. Prove it to me. Demonstrate that you can manage a budget responsibly. This arrangement will last for a minimum of 2 years. If you refuse or fail to comply, your rent adjusts to the current market rate, about $1,500 a month, and I reserve the right to initiate a standard 60-day notice to vacate. But that's... Sean started, then stopped himself. What could he actually say? That it was invasive? That it was strict? Yes. It was. That was entirely the point. Condition number 3. I looked Sean dead in the eye. You are going to write a formal, written acknowledgement and apology. In this letter, you will outline every major expense I have covered for you over the past 6 years. The down payment, the mortgage payments, the car notes, and the insurance. You will explicitly state that. Without my financial backing, you never could have sustained your lifestyle. And finally, you will issue a direct apology for the message telling me you were completely done and to never contact you. You will include the exact date you sent that text. This statement will be written and signed right here, witnessed by my attorney, Gerald Torres, and my neighbor, Trevor King. I will keep the document in my files as a safeguard against any future revisionist history. The room fell into a dead silence. Sean's face flushed red, his fists clenching at his sides. I could see the internal struggle happening behind his eyes, his stubborn pride warring against sheer desperation. He wanted to tell me where to go. He wanted to walk out the door, but he knew that without my intervention, they would be completely displaced in less than 2 weeks. Those are the terms, I said flatly. Take them or leave them. Rachel reached out, grabbing Sean's arm tightly. We take them, she said frantically, her voice breaking. Right, Sean? We take them. Sean looked at her, then looked back at me. I could see the exact moment his defiance crumbled. His shoulders dropped, and his gaze sank to the floor. Yeah, he whispered. We accept. I smiled, not a warm, fatherly smile, but one of professional satisfaction. A very practical decision. The doorbell rang right on cue. I stood up to answer it, opening the door to find Gerald Torres standing on the porch, briefcase in hand. Mr. Fisher, ready to get started, I said. Let's formalize this arrangement. Gerald set his briefcase on the dining table and unzipped it, pulling out a neat stack of documents. He was entirely professional, though I noticed his eyebrows rise just a fraction when he saw Rachel and Sean sitting quietly on the couch, like 2 defendants awaiting a verdict. Mr. and Mrs. Miller, Torres began formally. I am Gerald Torres, representing Mr. Fisher. I understand you are here to execute the terms regarding financial restructuring and assistance. Sean just gave a muted nod, while Rachel managed a soft, yes, sir. Torres pulled the quitclaim deed from his folder, the most critical piece of paper in the stack. This is a standard quitclaim deed for the property located at 892 Canyon View Lane, currently registered under the names of Rachel and Sean Miller. By signing this document, you are transferring all rights, title, and interest in the property to Daniel Fisher. Do you fully comprehend the nature of this transfer? We do, Rachel said softly. You understand that you will no longer hold any equity or ownership in the home. Mr. Fisher becomes the sole legal owner, and you will occupy the premises strictly as tenants. Yes. Torres looked directly at Sean. Mr. Miller, I need verbal confirmation from you as well. Sean ground his teeth, his expression strained. This was the moment of absolute accountability. Once his signature hit that paper, all the grand talk of independence would be legally documented as a fiction. He was signing away his primary asset just to clear the shortfalls he had created. Mr. Miller? Torres prompted again, I understand. Sean finally forced out, the words sounding incredibly heavy. Excellent. Torres slid the document across the table, tapping the signature lines. I need your signatures here, here, and here. I will notarize the document immediately. Rachel signed first, her hand trembling so much she could barely steady the pen, but she completed the lines and slid the paper over to her husband. Sean stared down at it for a long moment, his face reflecting a mix of frustration and resignation before he picked up the pen and signed his name 3 times in rapid succession. Torres efficiently applied his notary stamp, verified the entries, and placed the completed deed securely back into his briefcase. The transfer is complete, Torres stated. Mr. Fisher, you are now the sole legal owner of the property. I will have this recorded with the Maricopa County Recorder's Office first thing Monday morning. A quiet sense of finality washed over me. It wasn't a feeling of victory, but rather a proper alignment of facts. The home they had taken credit for, the home I had funded from day one, was now officially mine. By attempting to cut me out of their lives, they had ultimately forfeited the very thing they valued most. The irony was absolute. Next item, Torres said, producing a second document. The residential lease agreement. Standard terms. $800 a month, due on the 1st. A 60-day notice is required by either party for termination. Please sign here as tenants. They both signed without a word, much faster this time. They understood that the framework was set. Torres then placed a fresh sheet of paper and a pen directly in front of my son-in-law. Now, Mr. Miller, regarding the formal statement of acknowledgement. Mr. Fisher has outlined the required points. You may draft it here in the presence of the witnesses. Sean stared at the blank paper as if it were a direct threat. Right now? In front of everyone? Right now, I replied. Gerald is here, and Trevor will be stepping in. I checked my watch. In about 2 minutes. You write the statement, they witness the signature, and we conclude our business. Hoosist. What exactly do you want me to say? His voice was dangerously tight, thick with suppressed anger. I retrieved my phone and read directly from my prepared notes. I want a clear acknowledgement of every major financial contribution I've made. The down payment, the mortgage assistance, the vehicle notes, and the insurance. You will explicitly state that you could not sustain your lifestyle without my backing. And you will include a direct apology for the text message cutting ties, noting the exact date it was sent. You just want to humiliate me, he muttered. I want the truth documented, I said, meeting his gaze directly. If the truth feels humiliating, Sean, that's a reflection of your choices, not my terms. Every single word of it is fact. Sean grabbed the pen, his knuckles turning white. For a brief second, I thought he might snap it in half. Instead, he pulled the paper close and began writing furiously, the pen digging so hard into the page it nearly tore through. Rachel watched him. Tears still escaping hot down her cheeks, reaching out to touch his arm. He aggressively pulled, consumed by the reality of his situation. The doorbell rang again, and I opened it to find Trevor standing there, looking slightly confused. Hey, Daniel. You said you needed a hand with something? Come on in, Trevor. I just need you to witness a signature. I led him into the dining room. Trevor took in the scene. Torres with his legal folders, Rachel quietly crying, and Sean writing with sheer aggression. The confusion on his face turned to instant realization. What's going on here, Daniel? Just establishing some formal accountability, I said simply. Sean is drafting a statement confirming the financial history of the last few years. I just need you and Gerald to witness his signature." Trevor looked incredibly uncomfortable. "Look, Daniel, I'm not sure I should be getting in the middle of a family matter. It's a business matter now, Trevor. And I'd appreciate the assistance. You're a neutral party. You saw the trucks take the vehicles. You know exactly where things stand. I just want a clean record showing Sean is signing this of his own accord." Trevor let out a slow sigh. "All right, if it helps put an end to the chaos, I'll sign." Sean slammed the pen down and pushed the paper across the table. "There. Are you satisfied?" I picked up the page and read through the sharp, angry handwriting. The tone was resentful, but every single fact was perfectly accurate. "To whom it may concerns. I, Sean Miller, formally acknowledge that from 2019 through 2025, Daniel Fisher provided substantial and continuous financial support to myself and my wife, Rachel Miller. This support included a $28,000 down payment for our residence at 892 Canyon View Lane, monthly mortgage contributions of $1,450, auto loan payments totaling $680 a month, insurance premiums of $270 a month, and various emergency funds. Without Mr. Fisher's direct financial backing, we could not have maintained our residence, our vehicles, or our standard of living. On March 18, 2025, I sent a text message to Mr. Fisher stating we were completely done with him and to never contact us again. That statement was entirely disrespectful and unwarranted. I apologize for sending that message and for the strain it caused. I recognize that our current financial deficit is a direct result of losing the support we failed to appreciate. Signed, Sean Miller. It was perfect, bitter, resentful, and completely accurate. "Sign it and date it," I instructed. "Gerald and Trevor will witness." Sean executed the signature, and both Torres and Trevor signed directly beneath his name. Torres took a digital scan of the document for his records and handed the original physical page to me. "For your secure files, Mr. Fisher." I folded the paper carefully and slid it into my primary folder right alongside the bank statements, the spreadsheets, and the text printouts. It was a complete documentation of their dependency, their missteps, and their ultimate return to reality. "We are adjourned," I announced. "Gerald, thank you for your time. Trevor, appreciate you stopping by. Sean, Rachel, I will initiate the electronic transfers on Monday to clear your arrears and balances. The bank will rescind the foreclosure notice. You can collect the used vehicle on Tuesday. I will send you the address of the dealership, and the keys will be waiting at the front desk." Rachel stood up quickly, her eyes red. "Thank you, Dad. Thank you so much. I know we don't deserve this." "You don't," I interrupted calmly. "But you are my daughter, and despite your choices, I prefer not to see you completely displaced. That is why I am intervening. But it happens strictly under my structure." She nodded, wiping her eyes. Sean stood up next, looking at me with an expression that carried a heavy mix of resentment and forced respect. "I won't forget this, Daniel," he muttered. "I am counting on that," I replied. They left the house, with Torres and Trevor following shortly behind them. I stood alone in the quiet living room, holding the folder containing their complete financial surrender. I had secured the property title, established formal transparency, and reset the dynamic entirely on my terms. They wanted independence, and they had just discovered the absolute cost of reality. Now, they would spend the next 2 years operating under strict budget oversight, living in my house, and following my rules to prove they could manage their lives responsibly. Out in the garage, the Mustang was almost entirely complete, needing only the final detail work and assembly. Like the situation at hand, it was structured, sound, and precisely aligned. I poured myself a glass of bourbon, raised it to the empty room, and smiled. Here's to a thoroughly learned lesson. First thing Monday morning, I executed the wire transfers. $31,200 moved from my retirement account directly to the various creditors. Chase confirmed. The mortgage arrears were fully resolved. The 3 credit card companies updated their balances to 0, and the personal debts to Sean's friends were completely cleared. Every single transaction carried a precise electronic memo. Paid on behalf of Sean and Rachel Miller. Account settled in full. By Monday afternoon, the foreclosure auction was officially canceled. I received the automated legal confirmation from Chase while I was installing the chrome trim on the Mustang's grille. The July 15th auction date was wiped from the county schedules, and the trustee's sale notice was formally withdrawn. The property on Canyon View Lane was perfectly secure. On Tuesday, I drove out to a reliable dealership in Mesa and paid $4,800 cash for a clean 2015 Toyota Camry with 87,000 miles on the odometer. It was plain, gray, and incredibly economical. The perfect vehicle for a couple learning to live strictly within their means. I left the keys with the sales manager and sent a brief text to Rachel with the location. Your transportation is sorted. Ask for Mike. The keys are in his office. Her reply arrived almost instantly. Thank you, Dad. We are heading over to pick it up this afternoon. There were no dramatic emotional appeals, no long-winded apologies. Just a straightforward, respectful confirmation. Good. They were starting to understand. The quitclaim deed was officially recorded with the Maricopa County Recorder's Office on Wednesday, and the certified copy arrived in my mailbox by Friday afternoon. The title to 892 Canyon View Lane was now legally and irrevocably registered to Daniel Fisher. I framed the recorded copy and hung it on the garage wall right above my primary toolbox. A permanent reminder of what happens when people mistake stability for weakness. The very first monthly financial report landed in my email inbox the following Monday. Rachel had attached a detailed, comprehensive spreadsheet tracking every single dollar spent over the previous weeks. Rent, utilities, groceries, fuel, and basic personal care items were all perfectly categorized with scanned copies of every receipt attached. I reviewed the lines carefully. Their total expenditures for the month came out to $2,847. $800 went to my rental account. $340 covered utilities. $520 went to groceries. And $187 covered fuel. Every non-essential had been completely eliminated. No restaurant transactions. No streaming subscriptions. 0 impulse purchases. They were finally living the way they should have been living all along. I sent a one-word reply, received. The second month's report followed the exact same pattern, and the third month was even more disciplined. I could see the shift happening in their data. They were learning to budget, to cut unnecessary costs, and to make their income work. They had never developed this discipline before because I had always been there to catch them whenever they stumbled. Not anymore. 2 months into our new arrangement, I drove over to the property for my very first scheduled structural inspection. I sent a text 24 hours in advance. Property inspection scheduled for tomorrow at 2 p.m. Rachel replied immediately, "Understood, Dad. We'll make sure everything is ready." At exactly 2 p.m., I pulled into the driveway. The lawn was perfectly manicured. The trash bins were stored neatly out of sight, and the exterior of the home looked well maintained. A solid start. Rachel opened the door, and I noticed she looked significantly healthier. She had regained some weight, and the deep stress lines around her eyes had softened. Her gaze was clear and focused. "Hey, Dad, come on in." The interior of the home was completely spotless. The furniture was organized, the carpets were freshly vacuumed, and the kitchen counters were entirely clear. I noticed immediately that the massive, ostentatious 75-inch television was gone. They had likely sold it to recover some liquidity, replacing it with a modest, pre-owned 40-inch screen. Sean walked out from the hallway, looking tired but no longer defeated. He looked like someone who had adjusted to a demanding routine and was putting in the work. "Daniel," he said, offering a respectful nod. "The house is in good shape. See for yourself." I took a slow walk through the property, checking the water heater, inspecting the air filters, and verifying the plumbing. Everything was well maintained. They were protecting my asset. "Acceptable," I announced when I finished the walk. "Keep it at this standard." "We will," Sean said, squaring his shoulders and meeting my eye. "We're doing things the right way now, Daniel." I studied him for a moment. The unearned entitlement was entirely gone, replaced by a much more grounded, realistic perspective. "I can see that," I said. Rachel stepped forward holding a folder. "Here is this month's financial report. I know it isn't due until Monday, but I wanted to have it ready for the inspection." I accepted the folder but didn't open it right away. "How is work, Sean?" I asked. He blinked, clearly surprised by the personal question. "It's good. I actually just picked up a minor merit increase. 3%. It isn't huge, but it's yours," I finished for him. "That's what makes it count." A slight expression of relief crossed his face. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was close. "Yeah," he said quietly. "That's exactly right." I left 15 minutes later with the report in hand. Driving home, I felt a quiet sense of resolution. The frustration that had built up over the past months had completely dissipated, leaving only the reality of the situation. They had disregarded my boundaries. I had removed the safety net. They had faced the consequences, and now they were using the structure I provided to properly rebuild their lives. Our relationship would never be what it used to be, but it was built on absolute honesty now. By early September, the Mustang restoration was completely finished. Every mechanical component, every body panel, and every layer of paint was exactly where it belonged. I had spent the last 2 weeks polishing the chrome, detailing the interior, and ensuring everything met factory specifications. One evening, I stepped back to look at the completed project under the garage lights. The Acapulco blue paint gleamed like a mirror, reflecting every detail of the space, and the chrome accents caught the light beautifully. The interior smelled perfectly fresh, and the V8 engine idled with a deep, smooth, reliable purr. 3 years of patience, discipline, and meticulous attention to detail had turned a neglected piece of metal into something extraordinary. I ran my hand along the smooth finish of the hood, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. It was completely done. I pulled out my phone and sent a text to Rachel. "Come over this Saturday at noon. Bring Sean. I'll fire up the grill for lunch." Her response arrived seconds later. "We'd love to, Dad. See you then." Saturday was a classic, bright Arizona day. I had the patio table set, burgers ready for the grill, and plenty of cold drinks in the cooler. It was a straightforward, relaxed family lunch. They arrived right at noon in the gray Camry, both dressed casually but neatly. Rachel brought a homemade apple pie, and Sean carried a small pack of beverages, setting them down carefully on the patio table. "Just thought I'd bring these along if you wanted one," he said. "Appreciate it, Sean." "The cooler is fully stocked right there," I replied, gesturing to the ice. We didn't discuss the house, the spreadsheets, or the rent payments. We simply talked about everyday things. Rachel's projects, Sean's team at work, the fuel efficiency of the Camry, and the local news. It was a completely normal, respectful conversation. After lunch, Sean looked toward the open garage. "So, the Mustang, is she officially finished?" I stood up from the table. "Take a look for yourself." I led them into the garage and raised the main door. The desert sunlight flooded the space, hitting the Acapulco blue paint and making the car shine like a brilliant sapphire. Rachel let out a soft gasp. "Dad, it's absolutely gorgeous." Sean walked a slow circle around the car, inspecting the chrome bumpers, the restored upholstery, and the perfectly clean engine bay. "This is incredible, Daniel. How long did this take you?" 3 years, I said, opening the driver's side door. "It was completely rusted out when I bought it. I rebuilt it piece by piece. The transmission, the suspension, the bodywork, everything." "Mind if I look closer?" Sean asked, pointing toward the engine block. I nodded, watching as he leaned in to look at the carburetor and the pristine valve covers. I could see the genuine respect in his expression as he took in the quality of the craftsmanship. "You did all of this yourself? Every bolt, every weld, every single coat of paint?" I said, resting a hand on the fender. "It takes patience, and it takes strict discipline. You can't take shortcuts on a project like this, even when it seems easier. That's what gives it value." The parallel wasn't subtle, and I could tell they both understood exactly what I meant. Rachel wiped a stray tear from her cheek as she looked at the car. The Mustang was a tangible representation of everything we had been through, taking something fractured and neglected, and putting in the difficult, honest work to rebuild it into something strong and lasting. "Want to hear it run?" I asked. I climbed into the driver's seat and turned the key. The V8 engine fired up, instantly, settling into a deep, powerful rumble that vibrated through the garage floor. I let it idle for a moment, gave the throttle a light tap, and then shut it off. Sean's face lit up. "That sounds absolutely perfect." I climbed out of the car, and the three of us stood there together. For the first time in months, the silence between us felt entirely comfortable. "Look, Daniel," Sean said suddenly, his voice steady but serious. "I know I can't take back the things I said, or that text message. But I want you to know that I understand now. The lesson you were trying to teach us. We weren't actually standing on our own feet back then. We were leaning entirely on you while pretending we were doing it all ourselves." I listened quietly, letting him speak. "The rent, the monthly reports, the letter." He swallowed hard. "At first, I resented it, completely. I thought you were just trying to control us. But looking at where we are now, I see it. You weren't trying to run our lives. You were making us grow up. Took you long enough," I said, but there was no edge to my voice. Rachel stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me, holding on tightly, just like she used to when she was young. I let myself relax into the embrace, patting her back. "We're going to keep sending the reports, Dad," she whispered against my shoulder. "And we'll keep taking care of the house. I promise." "I know you will," I said gently, stepping back from the hug. Because if you don't, you know exactly what the reality is. Sean let out a genuine, relaxed laugh. Yeah, we definitely do. They stayed for another hour, sitting on the patio, sharing a conversation that felt unforced and honest. We weren't the same family we had been before. The dynamic built on unspoken dependencies and unearned entitlement was completely gone. But we were building a new relationship founded on mutual respect and clarity. When they prepared to leave, Rachel gave me one last hug at the door. Love you, Dad. Love you too, sweetheart. Sean extended his hand, and I shook it firmly. See you for the next inspection, Daniel. I'll be there on time, I replied. I watched as they drove down the street in the gray Camry. There were no flashy luxury vehicles, no inflated lifestyles they couldn't sustain. Just two people living responsibly within their means, learning to appreciate what they earned. The path to get here had been incredibly strict, but it was entirely necessary. I walked back into the garage, looking at the Mustang, and then let my gaze drift to the framed quitclaim deed on the wall. It was a permanent record of the property ownership, a testament to the structure that had brought stability back to their lives. They had attempted to cut me out, to enjoy independence without any of the responsibility. And in response, I had reset the boundaries completely. It wasn't done out of malice. It was done to establish accountability. Now, they occupied the property under a clear agreement, proving their discipline month by month through their financial tracking. Slowly but surely, they were becoming responsible individuals who understood that generosity requires respect, and that support is built on gratitude. They finally understood that family means mutual accountability, not a one-way financial obligation. I poured myself a final splash of bourbon, sat back in my leather chair, and watched the vibrant colors of the Arizona sunset fill the sky. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a text from Rachel. Thanks for today, Dad. It meant the world to both of us. I smiled and typed a quick response. See you next month. Normal time. The Mustang sat perfectly restored in the garage. The deed hung securely on the wall, and across town, my daughter and son-in-law, successfully managing their lives on honest terms. They finally understood the true value of independence. It was a thorough, lasting lesson, and that is the most rewarding outcome of all.